Hello, so I just received the questions that you sent. I figured instead of writing out the answers, I would just go through them and I'll read them out loud and then I will answer them so that you have them, the answers in my words with all of my nuances. So thank you for sending over your questions. Excited to answer them. So the first question says that you saw the trailer and you're excited to ask the first question. How did I come across the wonderful world of kink initially? And how did this whole epic adventure start for you? So I have been a kinkster and kinky my entire life, to my knowledge. My very first fantasies were all kinky. They involved bondage and whips and Catwoman. My first masturbatory material was Catwoman. And I always loved her cat suits and latex. I also gravitated towards rope. My very first sexual partners were all kinky and very open-minded. And so from the very first time that I had sex, I was engaging in public sex and exhibitionism and fisting and bondage. Those were just things that made sense to me. They felt right to my body. I explain this often to people in the way that different people enjoy different kinds of touch, and some people enjoy having a softer touch. So say if you're going to a massage therapist for the first time, you might not know the kind of touch that you would like. Do you like someone to be standing on your back and really digging in deep so that there's a lot of big sensation and internal movement happening? Or do you like something very surface and sensual and light in touch? All of us perceive touch and sensation a little bit differently. And for me, I am a masochist and I enjoy a high level of energy exchange and sensation exchange. So I think that addresses the first question. Second question. Being a fellow kinkster, I'm obligated to ask this next question. It is my understanding that everyone with an interest in kink and/or fetish had one specific encounter that introduced them to the world, either briefly or full-fledged thrust them into it. What was your first taste like? So as I mentioned before, it is really all I have ever known. All of my experiences and the way that I perceive sensation and sexual intimacy and exchange has been one that has been informed by my orientation as a kinkster. I think it's always been from the very beginning for me. Of course, there's always, we explore new elements of kink and BDSM and our psychological makeup, of who we are as sexual beings. That continues to evolve, continues to change. And we, the way that I experience rope right in this moment is different from the way I would experience rope with a different partner or 10 years ago or 10 years from now. Our bodies are always changing, and who we are is always shifting and changing. So each scene is always going to be new and different. Yeah. Let's see. This one is a little deeper for conversational purposes. Have you ever, or can you ever remember a time that you were kink shamed? So yes, absolutely. I'm a public figure, and I have been out as a erotic film performer, as someone who is queer, as someone who is kinky, for the last 20 years. And so I very regularly receive plenty of hate mail from people that say that I am going to burn in hell, or that are very offended by who I am as a feminist, as a queer, as a kinkster. I think when people live their truth out loud, sometimes that scares people. I think it mostly scares people when they have their own wound inside that is one of sexual shame, of their own shame, of their own body that they haven't reconciled with, or they don't have space to express their own sexuality in a way that feels nourishing, because there is a lack of those spaces. And that's exactly the reason I do the work that I do, so that people don't feel alone and isolated in their experiences of being queer, of being kinky, of being a feminist and a submissive. That's why it's so important to, for me individually, to live my life out loud. And that's why I've chosen to do that. And I absolutely do receive kink shame. I've lost leases. I've been evicted from housing when I was younger for being kinky and for working in porn. I have had rocks thrown at me for being queer. I've definitely experienced a lot of that hate, and that anger and that hate is coming out of a place of pain. So I think that that's important to keep in mind. It's something that's hard to hear, hard to read, hard to feel, but it's important activism that I do, and that it is slowly working at unraveling the sexual stigma surrounded, sexual shame and stigma surrounding all sexuality for everyone. So that's why I continue to do the work. Yeah, I'm just going to check the time because I have another interview coming up. Okay, all good. All right, I'm going to go on to the next question. And to piggyback off of that last question, what would you say to folks who choose to kink shame and bash the lifestyle? I would say that when those thoughts come up for you, that if you we have a saying, don't yuck anyone's yum. So if you think about latex or bouncing on balloons, or sitting on cakes, or any of this kind of play, because that's what it is, as offensive to you, then notice that feeling. Notice it and observe it, and then write it down. I'm noticing that I'm feeling anger or disgust or whatever they're feeling, tense, uncomfortable when I think about this person's sexuality. Be honest with yourself. Write that down, and then dig deeper. Dig deeper under what is there, because under that anger, you'll notice that there is a pain of, when do you normally have this feeling? And then think about, then usually there's a need that wasn't met when you were maybe younger, maybe even in your teens or early 20s, that wasn't met. And it's a pain, it's a sore that's open there, do you feel safe to fully express who you are as a sexual being? Do you feel completely supported in that? Do you remember a time where you felt not safe expressing who you are as a sexual being, or where you felt embarrassed or shamed for your sexuality? And sit with that. And then the next time that comes up for you, again, notice it. Step out of yourself and be an observer of those feelings that you're having. And then you can slowly start to work through that, and nurture that person. Nurture yourself where you have that wound of where you once felt not supported, or where you felt shamed, or stigmatized or unsafe in your own sexual self or your own sexual expression. So that's what I would say. Yeah. Next question. In your experience thus far, relevant to your depth of exploration, what has been your most invigorating, intoxicating moment when fully immersed in fetish? Oh, that's just gonna be, there's too many. Again, I've been having kinky sex for almost 22 years now. So that's, multiple decades, and I've done it professionally, globally. So there's a lot of kinky experiences there. I would say that I feel like, for me, I've done some extremely wild things, and really pushed my body to furthest extremes, and that is all very easily accessible on the internet. But I would say that I think that that emotional vulnerability is one of the things that is the most intoxicating, I think, and the most immersive. So that being said, I'd say with my dominant, my daddy of 15 years, that my experiences with him have been the most intimate and immersive, and some of those would be like my collaring and submissive training that we did together. Yeah, I would say those. And I would say that because, it's one thing when we're processing heavy sensation just physically, and it's another thing when there's an emotional intimacy connected to the experience, and that full surrender. I also experienced an absolutely transcendental experience called a hook pull, which is similar to a hook suspension, but it's when hooks are pierced through your flesh, and then they're hung up on the ceiling, and then you pull against them, and there's drums beating, and you're pulling against them. We also did something where we were connected together in a circle, dancing and pulling, and it was right after the passing of an elder in the community, Fakir Musafar, who is an absolute legend, and was a lovely friend in the community, and is greatly missed. He used to say that the body was the doorway to the soul, and in doing this dance, he did a lot of extreme body modifications and hook suspensions and many things. You should look him up. And I definitely saw Fakir, and I was able to say goodbye to him in doing that experience. I was able, I think those moments when we're able to transcend our body, there's the moments of great connection and surrender, and there's the moments where we surrender to something totally greater as well, and that we hover beyond our body into the great unknown. I think those are the kind of experiences that draw me in the greatest. Now, it seems from what I've seen so far that you dabble more on the side of being submissive. Yes, that's why the show was called Submission Possible. Given how much you know about the lifestyle, and assuming that you're aware of what it is like to be dominant, do you ever see yourself switching roles? So, I think that everyone has a dominant and submissive side. I am, even more than a submissive, I am definitely a masochist, and I am a rope slut, and I am a rope bottom, but I also can be a submissive. I also do have a dominant side, although that usually plays out in the kind of way that I really enjoy receiving a caning or a spanking. So if I'm gifting someone else a caning or a spanking, then it's like I'm eating a delicious pie and I want to share it with them. I know what it tastes like and I want to share that experience with them. So that's, but I definitely have topped before in scenes, and I think it depends on who I'm playing with as far as who's on top and who's on bottom. But I think we all have that energy. Let's see. In all your experiences in the lifestyle, have you ever felt any shame for having fetishes, given that our society is so cut and dry and mostly judgmental? I can vouch for feeling shame sometimes for what floats the boat, so to speak. Have you ever felt it? And if so, how do you cope with that feeling? Have I ever had shame, experienced shame for being kinky? I think that when I was younger, I remember I had a girlfriend at the time who didn't love me playing with other people or even professionally, and I loved her very, very much, and I know it, even though it was within our agreement and it was communicated beforehand, I felt shame when she would ask me if I was enjoying myself in my work, because I was, and that was a part of my work, to enjoy myself and to express my authentic pleasure on camera. So yeah, I think that is, I don't care so much what the general public thinks, but I think that I felt some shame there, some shame and guilt for experiencing pleasure, and I had to kind of work through that. And I had a partner before that as well, where there were certain things where they felt jealous about not providing me pleasure or me experiencing pleasure outside of our relationship. And I think that that's something that sometimes young people struggle with, is we all have feelings of jealousy. So working through that in a way that is owning your own feelings instead of pushing that onto someone else so that they experience shame, But I think that those have been the times where I've felt the most shame. But I always lean into who I am and follow my authentic self. And it was hard to let go of those relationships, but it's important to be honest with ourselves and with who we are, and then you find the right partners that will also support that. What do you hope to inspire in others, and who may be just starting off? What do you hope to inspire in others who may be just starting off in their kink adventures? And how does the possibility to educate so many people on a subject so taboo in the mainstream world feel? It feels really great. I've been on this journey for a very, very long time. Like I said, I've been creating media, books, podcasts, working at holding space for telling people's stories and smashing sexual stigma for the last 20 years. 20 years ago, I moved to San Francisco and started a nonprofit art gallery that promoted women and transgender artists. And through that, I also told a great deal of stories of sex workers and kinky stories and supporting sexuality. So, the work that I've been doing surrounding sexuality and gender is something I've been doing for a very long time. And I have 3 different books out that also address sexuality and kink head on. So I've been doing this in other mediums, and I've directed over 60 films within the feminist porn canon, also again addressing kink and feminism and sexuality. So I've been doing this very hardy long-term work for quite some time. but it feels amazing to be taking that work and everything that I've learned over these past 2 decades and bringing it to television. I'm feeling really, really inspired to speak to this mainstream audience and doing so through television. And I think that it's a really brilliant time in television right now as far as representation of queer identity and trans identity and kink identity. I just watched the fantastic documentary called Disclosure around trans identity and history throughout television, and so much of that resonated with me. So yeah, it's an important time to be doing this work, and I'm excited to be here and doing it. Yeah. You're helping people to really connect with something that can be made to feel unobtainable for some. How do you respond to that? That's exactly the reason I'm doing this work, is that growing up in Southern Ohio, outside of Cincinnati, I did not have representation of myself as a kinky queer femme on television. I definitely did not see myself there. And I knew that when I left Ohio that my purpose in life was to hold space for these stories, and to show representation of kinky and queer identities for that girl that's left back in Ohio, for that girl in Middle America, for that person that's growing up in a small town and is desperate to find an affirmation of their identity anywhere, So I hope that people do see this show and see that our sexuality is massively diverse, and that there is space for you to explore it, and that you're not alone. What do you hope people will take away with them after watching your docuseries? So exactly what I just said, just that I want people to not feel alone. I want people to see themselves represented and to feel empowered to explore who they authentically are and express their sexual desires and their kinks and the things that they want to explore with their partners, and to live a life of happiness. So yeah, I just want to hold space for those identities, for those stories. Okay, thank you.